The central conflict for Sam Fisher as a character is the understanding that while his actions save innocent lives, they also prop up and maybe even perpetuate the forces that necessitate those actions. In Chaos Theory, Douglas Shetland wants to tear the world down. In his mind, politicians have steered America into endless wars to maintain the status quo, and peaceful progress has been made impossible. Shetland's motivations are generic, but they speak directly to the source of Sam's frustrations with his job. Sam, one way or another, is forced to kill Shetland, a longtime friend, but Chaos Theory ends largely without delving into how those events affected Sam, nor how he reconciles the people he fights to protect with the actions of the American government, which so often necessitates Sam's job in the first place. Enter the middle section of the Splinter Cell franchise, Double Agent, of which there are 2 versions, and Essentials. It's here where Splinter Cell, as a series, begins struggling with its identity, and playing each game concurrently laid bare a vision that is disorganized and severely underwritten. Between Double Agent and Essentials, there are competing visions of the same story, as well as competing visions of the same game. Both Double Agents do something better or worse than the other, which makes them particularly interesting to analyze, but also somewhat maddening. Important plot threads take a backseat to underdeveloped themes, and others are just seemingly lost. It's difficult to tell if various plot holes and extraneous lines of dialogue were the result of poor writing, if there were plans underneath them that never came to fruition, or if their apparent connection to Conviction, the next game in the series, is only due to Conviction retroactively connecting the dots of a messy narrative. To come clean, while this video is billed as a retrospective, I have actually never played Essentials or Ubisoft Montreal's version of Double Agent before. I knew there were differences between the 2 Double Agents, but did not realize how drastic those differences were, both in their stories and gameplay. As a lifelong Splinter Cell fan, finding this out kinda made me feel like my entire life had been a lie. Version 1, developed by Ubisoft Shanghai, released for 7th gen consoles and plays closer to Pandora Tomorrow, Shanghai's previous Splinter Cell. Version 2, developed by the aforementioned Ubisoft Montreal, released for 6th gen consoles and plays closer to Chaos Theory, Montreal's previous Splinter Cell. Essentials, a PSP exclusive also developed by Ubisoft Montreal, is sometimes competent, sometimes fun, and entirely bizarre. Released about a year after Chaos Theory and before either Double Agent, Essentials is a compilation of levels from previous Splinter Cells, as well as a few original levels, recut in what at least looks like a port of Pandora Tomorrow. In Essentials' version of Chaos Theory's New York, you'll hear Don Jordan as Lambert and Claudia Besso as Grimm's daughter, the audio seemingly ripped straight from Chaos Theory. But if you trip an alarm, you'll get audio from Pandora Tomorrow, where Dennis Haysbert and Adriana Anderson play Lambert and Grimm's daughter respectively. Also in Chaos Theory's New York, William Redding gives Sam a secondary objective to bug cameras. Essentials does away with that secondary objective, but does give you one to sneak into a security room and disable the cameras. This objective wasn't part of the original Chaos Theory level, so when you disable the cameras, Redding, originally played by Thor Bishoprick, tells Sam the cameras are down, but it's clearly not Thor Bishoprick.
Great job, Sam. You've disabled all the cameras in the penthouse.
Fisher, since everyone is asking everyone for intel, I'd love to have a few chips at the big table.
This mysterious one-line Redding goes uncredited. Essentials only has 4 voice actors in its credits, even though the game has way more than 4 voices. It all looks very haphazard. Essentials didn't review well at launch, and it's easy to see why. The controls are unintuitive, the PSP only had 1 stick, so by default, moving the camera and moving Sam are 2 actions that have to be done separately. I got used to it and even enjoyed a few of its missions, but it all came across pretty uninspired. I had plenty of weird lighting and visual bugs, but some of those may have appeared due to the copy of Essentials I played. It's too bad, because the PSP does not seem like a system that couldn't handle a good Splinter Cell game, even with its limitations. All things considered, I'd say Montreal's Double Agent, as well as the narrative Montreal tells between it and Essentials, to be the better version of events and a more comprehensive idea of where the series would go during and after Double Agent. If you look at this section of Splinter Cell as a whole, you can just make out a fascinating story about corruption, loyalty, and betrayal. The potential here, though, is buried in disjointed storytelling and, specifically for Shanghai, gameplay that never seems to be whole. Of the events set during Splinter Cell's middle section, Sarah's death, Lambert's death, and Sam's falling out with Third Echelon are the most important. The inciting event is Sarah's death, the darker tones, Sam's supposed spiral into self-destruction, and his deep cover mission all start there. This eventually leads to Lambert's death, which each game treats a little differently. Underneath those plot points is a conspiracy subplot. Sam's actions as a double agent put him at odds with Third Echelon, specifically with Assistant Director Lawrence Williams. Though Williams and his conspiracy are much more prominent in Essentials and Montreal's double agent than they are in Shanghai's. It's an awkward balancing act each game fails to do well. Sarah's death is a plot contrivance, and even considering the events that take place in Conviction, it's not difficult to imagine, in an alternate universe, a version of Double Agent where Sarah is uninvolved. In Montreal's version of events, Williams is established as a mole within Third Echelon. His motivation to undermine Sam and Lambert, though, as far as the games are concerned, is unclear. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, but Williams doesn't return in Conviction, while the conspiracy against Fisher and the US government does. The Splinter Cell wiki, linking to a screenshot from a 2012 forum post, says Williams was driven by envy of Lambert and Fisher and eventually forced out of Third Echelon. This explanation, of course, doesn't appear anywhere in either Double Agent or Essentials. Double Agent's villains meet a similar fate. Emile Dufresne, the leader of John Brown's army and Double Agent's main antagonist, is made stylistically distinct with a white turtleneck and a smooth southern drawl, but his manifesto and dialogue are a generic condemnation of corruption and decadence without a precise definition or ideology. John Brown's army is presumably named after the famed militant abolitionist, but the title appears purely cosmetic. You could levy a similar criticism at Shetland's villainy in Chaos Theory. Shetland's final speech to Sam is somewhat reminiscent of Dufresne's words, but the context surrounding Shetland's actions, as well as the context surrounding the villains of previous Splinter Cells, lends their actions the weight of real-world history and politics. In Chaos Theory, you'll hear enemy soldiers discuss American military intervention, and Sam sneaks into a bank he once raided with the CIA during the US invasion of Panama. Toshiro Otomo, Chaos Theory's other antagonist, is a Japanese imperialist seeking to give control of the country back to the Emperor. The first three Splinter Cells may not be sprawling epics, but their villains and events have identifiable and logical connections to real-world history and politics deeper than surface-level grievances. Double Agent misses out on this, substituting the spy thriller twists and turns of previous games with Sam's undercover work and attempts to gamify those themes through its trust mechanic and branching storylines, an ambitious idea that neither Shanghai or Montreal is able to fully form. Montreal delivers its story as a debriefing between Sam and Williams, set after the game's events and changing depending on your choices. I'd speculate this narrative device was chosen at least partially because, with Double Agent's branching story, making alternate versions of each scene was easier than working that into in-level character interactions and dialogue. The temporal back and forth, though, doesn't carry the same intrigue and excitement as previous Splinter Cells, when Sam's missions would suddenly change and the stakes would rise as world events reached a breaking point. Double Agent and Essentials both largely lack this mounting pressure. The games try to fit too many ideas into the same story, and none of them are nurtured. Shanghai appears to have gotten caught up in making a sleek and shiny next-gen spectacle, rather than just a good stealth game. Moments like Sam having to open his reserve parachute, or when he's forced to take control of a helicopter, are misguided attempts at cinematic grandeur. Interaction menus, traditionally at the top right-hand corner of the screen, are replaced by minimalistic symbols at the bottom. You can hear Sam breathing and see beads of sweat on his forehead. Most importantly, stealth goes from a visibility and sound meter to a simplified binary visibility indicator. When the dot on Sam's back or at the bottom of the screen is green, he's hidden. When it's yellow, he's visible. When it flashes red, I reload the previous save and try sneaking again. Line of sight matters more in Shanghai's Double Agent than moving slowly through darkness or finding clever ways around obstacles. It's kind of annoying how much of these levels are filled with ambient light Sam can't do anything about, or simply just take place during broad daylight. Rather than dynamic, Shanghai stealth becomes repetitive. NPC dots on Sam's motion tracker turn red when they're investigating something, so you hit walls and other out-of-the-way objects with Sam's ultrasonic emitter, hoping to lure enemies and sneak behind their backs. This motion tracker is an addition I actually really like. It's a reminder of a time when Tom Clancy branded games were filled with pseudo-realistic gadgets that existed on the edge of believability, but came with some drawbacks. The tracker doesn't show which way enemies are facing, and it loses connection when Sam moves. It's advantageous, but inconvenient in a way you'd imagine early versions of jet aircraft or night vision were. Montreal's double agent may not rise above or improve upon Chaos Theory's design, but it at least extends it. Sam has sound and visibility meters, and levels are dynamic, darker, and include more interesting obstacles. As I switched back and forth between the two games, it occurred to me how often Montreal had me stop and interact with something, whether it be disarming a mine or disabling an auto turret. Shanghai, by comparison, strings set pieces together with gameplay sections where the stealth largely comes down to staying out of enemy eyesight. Some of these set pieces are undoubtedly cool, like when Sam needs to rappel down a skyscraper or plant a bug in a laser-filled safe room, but they're also gimmicky, disposable moments that lack the dynamics and interactivity of Splinter Cell's stealth, and their excitement gets in the way of better gameplay and storytelling. When Sam is told to kill Hisham Hamza, another double agent, the moment is an obnoxious overload of sights and sounds. You can hear Hamza talking through the rifle scope, and both Dufresne and Lambert radio in to speak with Sam while explosions rattle his aim. Hamza eventually gets in a fight and moves behind a wall, and the whole time you have to decide whether or not to shoot him. Montreal's version of this is subdued, but dramatically I think it's more effective. Sam finds Hamza injured and can either help him escape or kill him. For the latter part of this mission, Hamza just follows Sam around. You're given a big chunk of time to decide his fate, which means plenty of opportunities to second guess yourself. Montreal's experience may be slower and lack visual splendor, but the stealth is deeper and levels are much more engaging. There's a small bit on Cozumel, Montreal's 5th level, where 2 guards stand in front of a door. You can disable the lights and try to sneak past them, or maybe shoot a sticky cam near them and knock them out with gas. In another small moment on New York, Montreal's final level, there's an auto turret at the end of a narrow hallway with a few guards nearby. You can hit the turret with an EMP to lure the guards and knock them out with gas from a sticky cam, or toss a frag grenade, kill the guards, and hit the turret with an EMP afterward. Little moments and scenarios like these are spread throughout Montreal's levels, allowing you to dig into Sam's bag of tricks and come up with creative solutions to unique challenges, even if that means hitting the right light with an EMP to sneak past a pesky guard. Shanghai's binary visibility indicator will switch between green and yellow in lighting that doesn't always make it obvious, and enemies will see and detect you from long distances and awkward angles, and this gives you less room for mistakes. Through this relatively rigid stealth system, paired with level design that emphasizes spectacle over depth, Shanghai creates missions that aren't as dynamic or fun. This extends to Double Agent's trust meter, maybe the biggest mechanical addition to gameplay. As Sam is working undercover, his actions will either improve or hurt his reputation with the NSA or JBA. Neither developer implements the trust meter perfectly, and both, in one way or another, struggle to seamlessly work it into gameplay. Montreal's trust meter is 1 bar, meaning your choices always affect both the NSA and JBA's opinion of Sam. It's a tug of war that makes you think about objectives tactically as well as narratively. You might skip a side objective not because it's difficult or tricky to find, but because you're compensating for decisions you'll have to make later on and giving yourself room to move, hedging your bets. Your trust level can affect the gear Sam has for missions, but the most serious consequence for pushing the meter all the way to one side or the other is that Sam's told to get to a computer, or if you're at JBA headquarters, return to the living area before a timer runs out. If you don't, it's game over. This is an elegant solution to a problem I imagine Montreal hoped players would avoid without realizing they were avoiding it. The tension of dealing with competing objectives can easily erode away and become frustration over repeatedly having Sam old man jog to a computer. It is a balancing act, though, I think Montreal mostly succeeds with. The trust meter keeps you constantly thinking about the decisions you make and may even force you to make a choice you actually don't want to. It's evocative of the situation Sam finds himself in, and toward the end of the game, you might feel some of the same strain Sam exhibits after months of keeping his cover. Shanghai splits the trust meter onto 2 separate bars, meaning not all objectives affect each trust level, which in some ways does make more sense, but it isn't as compelling. For the most part, objectives become a list of things to complete, and since there's often no downside to completing either NSA or JBA side objectives, then why not complete them all? Nearly every level of Shanghai's also includes a secondary objective to stay undetected or reach a part of the level without alerts. Other Splinter Cells have stealth requirements too, including missions that fail if Sam is detected once, but tying stealth to the trust meter feels arbitrary, an excuse to inject urgency into the trust mechanic since, for the most part, Shanghai doesn't offer a more creative way of doing so. If you enjoy ghosting or rolling with your mistakes, it's frustrating then when you're caught and a bit of the trust bar depletes. By virtue of being a stealth series, Splinter Cell already has consequences if Sam sets off alarms or gets detected. Tying the trust meter to stealth is redundant. This is all compounded, of course, by the fact that Shanghai stealth just isn't as good. To their credit, Shanghai does attempt to make its version of events a little more logical, and the missions at JBA headquarters are a unique blend of Splinter Cell stealth with lots of sudden opportunities to complete objectives. While sneaking around the compound, you may get a brief chance to record a high-ranking JBA member's voice, or an opportunity to sneak into their office and nab some intel. It keeps you on your toes and observing your surroundings. Unfortunately, all Shanghai's JBA HQ missions are on a timer. Each one starts with a JBA member giving Sam busy work and a time limit. If you don't complete the objective or report back once the timer runs out, the JBA's trust meter drops. This busy work Sam's given amounts to uninspired mini-games, like a Tom Clancy version of Mario Party. At one point, Dufresne tells Sam to decrypt an email, and the decryption is essentially a slightly different version of Sudoku. Again, it feels like Shanghai painted itself in a corner and used a brute force method to inject urgency where it couldn't build it otherwise, and a few of those cool organic spy moments become more tedious than fun. When you break into Dufresne's office to crack his safe, he and Jamie walk in afterward for a brief conversation. It's a neat surprise, but the entire time for me is spent waiting for the two to walk away so I can move on to the rest of the level with whatever time I have left. Montreal went the other direction with its JBA HQ missions. For the most part, they play like normal missions. You can't kill guards, but you can knock them out, and there isn't a timer, so you can take your time completing objectives. I do prefer Montreal's approach here, but I should acknowledge it does kind of feel silly. There is a throwaway bit of dialogue in the first HQ mission where one of the terrorists talks about someone sneaking around and knocking people out. When you grab people and interrogate them, Sam's mask muffles his voice, ostensibly hiding his identity. But even considering those things, it still feels funny that you're able to knock a bunch of dudes out, and everyone in the JBA seems pretty casual about it all. Each double agent tries to form some kind of connection between Sam and a few of his JBA counterparts, but these relationships are thin and really never given time to develop. In previous games, Sam's banter with Lambert and Grimm was endearing and fun. Sam wasn't just a lone operative or an action hero, he was a part of a team that worked together, and that dialogue was humanizing and provided some levity. Double Agent, by comparison, is a fairly lonely experience. Grimm is gone, and Lambert's role is considerably reduced. Neither Montreal nor Shanghai does a great job rounding out the new characters Sam spends his time around, and without Grimm and Lambert calling in to give Sam updates, we not only miss out on their previously established relationships, but also how they may have changed given Sam's situation. Jamie Washington, with whom Sam escapes prison, is shown as violent and puerile. Montreal does a good job of this when Sam and Jamie break out of Ellsworth Penitentiary, where Jamie tests Sam's patience throughout the level. Both double agents show Moss as confrontational, overbearing, and immediately suspicious of Sam. For Shanghai, this culminates in the game's final level, where Sam hunts down the final JBA members, and if you grab Moss, he and Sam get into a brief fight. I think, to various degrees, both games want Sam to feel guilty for his secrecy and eventual turn on JBA characters. This is a narrative arc that's not too difficult to imagine. Sam goes undercover, ingratiates himself with bad people, sees small glimpses of their humanity, and at the end, even if his actions were right, Sam has a tough time shaking off the guilt of ruthlessly betraying their trust. Montreal pushes this the hardest. In the last level, when Sam is tasked with killing JBA leadership, each character has some something to say to Sam if you're able to grab them. But these character moments aren't backed up by actual relationships, only assumed ones. Both games really want you, and Sam, to care about Enrica, Sam's kinda sorta love interest. Unlike other JBA members, Enrica is painted sympathetically, a once promising student with noble goals who fell into the JBA but doesn't agree with their actions. It's weak writing, an attempt to absolve her of her involvement with the JBA. Her inclusion as a romantic partner is forced and unnecessary. Neither game really does enough to develop their relationship outside a few missions, and it's awkward that Sarah's death is so quickly forgotten about, while Sam's sudden romance with Enrica, real or not, is the game's most prominent relationship. Montreal completely fumbles the landing at the end. Enrica turns and helps Sam disarm the JBA's bombs. After Sam's showdown with Dufresne, we last control Sam outside. In the ending cutscene, Enrica walks out into the area we last saw Sam, and from the same door we used as Sam, and calls out to a figure who she thinks is Sam. Sam, from the door Enrica just came from, screams to warn Enrica, but before he can do anything, Enrica's shot by another Splinter cell, who then apparently hides as Sam comes running to Enrica's rescue. Enrica dies, Sam screams, and then lies on the ground long enough for snow to pile up on him, at which point the other Splinter cell returns and Sam emerges from the snow and murders him. It's nonsense. Shanghai's spectacle and next-gen-ness is misguided, but they do handle Enrica better, and that spectacle is put to more effective use during Double Agent's other big moments, like the cruise ship explosion and Lambert's death. If Sam disarms the bomb aboard the cruise ship, Dufresne executes Enrica on the spot. Setting aside the fact that neither game really takes the time to build well-written relationships, this scene is at least dramatic and consequential. In a better game with detailed characters, I might even say it's bold of Shanghai to kill off a main character so brutally and suddenly. Afterward, if you go to the JBA's incinerator, you'll find Enrica's body dumped and ready for disposal, and of course, as you walk around HQ and complete objectives, the places Enrica should be are empty. In this regard, Montreal doesn't share the same courage of its convictions. If Sam disarms the bomb, he and Enrica are beaten, but they both survive and the game goes on. There's no lingering consequence outside the trust meter. Maybe the most frustrating thing from this collection of Splinter Cell games is how Lambert's death is, again, a plot point that no game really understands how to correctly handle. In Essentials, Sam executing Lambert is unavoidable, a decision that's inconsistent with Sam's prior characterization. It also happens in a brightly lit conference room that's slightly unkempt. Because Essentials is an anthology, there's no dramatic build-up to this moment. You may not necessarily be able to blame Essentials for being an anthology, but the choice to include Lambert's death and to make it so understated are bizarre. Montreal removes the moment from gameplay altogether. Once Lambert is captured, the closest Sam physically gets to him, at least during gameplay, is an office. Sam can either plant evidence that affirms or blows Lambert's cover. If Sam plants evidence against Lambert, Moss kills him during a cutscene. A sad, but also underwhelming way to resolve maybe Double Agent's biggest moment. Shanghai sets Lambert's execution in a dim, dirty room, the game switches to first person, and we at least get a Lambert that looks like he was captured by terrorists rather than forced into a meeting that could have been done over email. No matter what you choose for Lambert, nor the portrayal of his death, I think, based on what we know of Sam, it does not make sense that Sam would sacrifice Lambert to keep his cover. We know Sam as someone who's not afraid to be a little insubordinate and argue against orders he doesn't like. He's loyal to the people around him, and while he's fully comfortable using violence to complete his objectives, his violence isn't aimless. Yes, we control Sam's actions, and that may even change the way we perceive his character, but I think there are moments we can connect and find consistent character traits. Whether you choose to kill or spare Dahlia Tal and Pandora tomorrow, Sam's dialogue afterward indicates he'd rather face the consequences of not killing her. Similarly, Sam would rather rescue the downed pilots in Chaos Theory than allow them to die. In the second mission of Essentials, Sam disobeys orders and sneaks into the jungle on his own to rescue Shetland from Colombian guerrillas. These may not be tactically safe choices, but Sam is fine facing the consequences. So, at the end of Double Agent, when a SWAT team is bearing down on JBA HQ and Dufresne is on the verge of detonating multiple atomic bombs, it's never really made sense to me that Sam would kill Lambert in order to preserve what little time he has before he's forced to blow his cover. It makes more sense that Sam would shoot Jamie and fight his way to the bomb. Why not break one more order? Starting Double Agent with a tragedy is a tricky choice. It's not a fun place to begin a new story, or a new adventure, as the Xbox 360 menu tells it.
Play Sam Fisher's new adventure.
Grief and remorse are heavy, miserable emotions, and I think if you don't give those emotions the time they deserve, using them comes off superficial and melodramatic. Neither of the Double Agents or Essentials is able to figure out where Sam is at this point in Splinter Cell, or figure out how to work the death of a loved one into a story about spies and betrayal. He's spurred by the loss of his daughter into a dangerous mission, but grief doesn't seem to have much to do with Sam's actions. Shanghai's emphasis on set pieces and excitement may have helped Double Agent's bigger moments shine, but neglected is a smooth transition into Sam as a fugitive. Montreal does a better job drawing a through line between Double Agent's story and Essentials. Williams pulls strings behind the scenes, and at the end of Essentials is positioned as Sam's opponent moving forward, even if he lacks a defined motivation. Part of the dilemma, I think, is figuring out what to do with Sam after Chaos Theory. He's a middle-aged hero whose disdain for some of the missions he's tasked with is unambiguous, but through his actions he also perpetuates the system that's made an operative like him necessary, an American empire that meddles in other countries' elections, betrays and abandons its own assets, and whose historical actions lead to blowback that threatens innocent people. Confronting the root cause of all the crises in Splinter Cell would mean Sam would have to somehow challenge the military-industrial complex and foreign policy of the United States. To write a story like that may not be impossible, but in the context of the early Splinter Cells, when Sam is just one aging soldier with a few gadgets and some high-tech goggles, grounding it may be difficult. There are stories with a similar premise, games where the main character breaks away from the powers of the state and, through nuclear deterrence and the threat of mutual destruction, confronts the military might of massive global superpowers. Again, maybe not impossible, but definitely difficult. As the original Splinter Cell franchise heads into its twilight years, the final games turn away from the grounded, pseudo-realistic world of its early titles and become stylistic and faster-paced, a shifting identity for its gameplay as well as the man behind the goggles.